Welcome to the Moral and Translation Superiority of the NWT, the New World Translation, Part 3, Micah 5, 2 through 4. You know, it's not common that you see a lot of channels or venues anywhere openly defending the New World Translation, and I'm proud to do so. Because I understand the New World Translation probably as good or better than most. Because I've studied it for a long time. And I've studied it in detail. I've looked at it critically. I don't always agree with it. I've explained areas where I disagree with it. But the kinds of criticism that the New World Translation, published by the Watchtower Bible Tract Society, Jehovah's Witnesses, has received is ridiculous. It's absurd, and it needs to stop. And the ones who are at the top of the list of these ridiculous criticisms are the Trinitarian scholars and apologists. And what really bothers them is the New World Translation was produced by a group of men that in no way matched the education level of most modern and even some older English Bible translation committees or translators. Not even close. It's not to say they were uneducated. They were not. But they're nowhere near as formally educated in the biblical languages as these other translation committees and translation scholars. And it bothers them when they see the New World Translation is better than them. And they know it because they're not stupid. They may be blind when it comes to their doctrine and not seeing past it to what the text is really saying. I've shown that. I've demonstrated that. You can see parts 1 and parts 2 for more on that. You can look at my JWD editions. You can look at my Watching the Ministry blog. I've talked about it and explained it, and I also have nowhere near the education that these scholars have. But that's not to say I'm uneducated. I don't look to formal education as the basis for whether something's correct or not. It should be an indication, right? I mean, you would think if you've gone to all these schools, even Trinitarian schools, where they pretty much require you to believe in the Trinity to go to that school, various seminaries, like Dallas Theological Seminary, and certainly if you're taking a class taught by a Trinitarian teacher, if you don't produce a paper that's in line with what they expect those texts to say, I don't think you're going to have a very good grade. Maybe I'm wrong. But what I'm here to tell you is wrong, is the amount of abuse. I don't care if you don't like the Watchtower Society because of other issues, right? We can all point to things in different groups. We can look at the Catholics. We can look at the Protestants. We can look at John Calvin. We can look at all kinds of people and find things that we really don't like and we really just maybe are disgusted by. Whatever. That does not give you license to then just openly condemn everything that you don't agree with. If you don't have the evidence, if you can't explain your position and have that position mount a defense when someone comes against what you say and says, wait a minute, what you say doesn't hold up. Yeah, you're smart, all that stuff, but the things you're using to support your translation that you're supposed to have learned in all that learning, it doesn't support that translation. And you're reading into the text things that aren't there, historically or grammatically. And you take things that are there out, like the divine name. How did you figure that out? What in the Bible or in your scholarly learning gives you the authority to remove the name of the God of the Bible. You don't have that kind of authority, and you did it anyway. And you don't have the authority to mistranslate things just because you don't like what they say. If you don't like the fact that John 1:1 shows the Word was a God as one of the sons of God in the beginning with God, the one God of the Bible, the Father, and that God who was with his Son, a God, said that the other sons of God are gods, just like his Son, who is a God, said they're gods when others accused him of being a God. You don't have authority to change that in the Bible. So how does this relate to Micah chapter 5? Well, in both ways, really. Micah chapter 5, verses 2 through 4, provide us with a pre-Christian text. I've talked about it in my CW Jaw Talk sub-series about the evidence that we have before Jesus was even born as a man, that shows that texts speak about him being born as a man and also talk about other things that are uniquely fulfilled in him, like the things he did before he was a man, born in Bethlehem, and one of those things that he did after being born as a man, standing and shepherding in the name of his God, Jehovah, the Father. So we get a lot where it concerns Micah 5. We get pre-Christian evidence Jesus is the biblical Messiah. We have texts that date to before the time when he came as the Messiah, and that describe his birth and talk about things before his birth, and that he would do things while on earth, like use the name of his God, stand and shepherd in the name of that God. And yet, those who criticize the New World Translation that uses the name of that God take out the name of that God and distort the teaching of the things that the Messiah is said to have done before he was born as the Messiah, and speaking about that God. Let's bring up Micah chapter 5. Let's look at it at the different translations at the Bible Hub and just see what they say. Shouldn't they be pretty clear, all right? I mean, we have a lot of scholars today. A lot of really smart people. Well, they're smarter than me, right? They think they are. They've got the degrees. They're smarter than NWT. So let's just see how smart they are. Let's see how clearly they've translated for us this text. New International Version. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. Now, this part here, this is really the key part of Micah chapter 5, verse 2 we're going to talk about tonight. This part here, origins, is technically correct. There is a plural word used here, but it doesn't make sense. And I'm going to explain why as we go through this discussion. But it's not technically wrong. But can you explain, just by reading this, what kind of origins this text is talking about? It's talking about origins from of old, right? From ancient times. So someone's going to come out from Bethlehem, from the clans of Judah, who's going to be ruler over Israel, but whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. So how would you explain that? the plural. It's not very clear, is it? Maybe you have an explanation, but I don't think it's very clear. Sometimes the explanation is that it's referring to his descendant line, his lineage, his origins in terms of all the different people. Like you might relate to the two lineages that are given of Jesus in the New Testament, right? That's kind of how some explain this. And I agree, I think from of old, from ancient times, I think the NIV does probably the best job of the non-NWT modern translations. I don't always agree with NIV. I think often it's pretty bad. And in some cases, like with the divine name, it's morally bankrupt, right? But that doesn't mean it's always bad, right? It's just like with the NWT, right? These Trinitarian scholars and apologists, it's like they can never say anything positive about it. Always complete condemnation and hatred. Like really bad. But I don't hate the NIV. I just point out where I think it's really bad, where it's morally bankrupt, and then where it does things that are correct. But I think there's something here that doesn't connect. Let's take a look at some of the other translations. New Living Translation, one whose origins, again the plural, are from the distant past, right? So very, very similar to NIV. What are these origins, though? Right? It's not clear. You'd have to then look at it in an extended context for, like, I guess, lineage, right? The way it's often presented by many who adopt this plural reading. English Standard Version, whose coming forth is from of old, from ancient days. Now, that's a little different than origins. Whose coming forth. Right? Berean Study Bible. One whose origins are from of old, from the days of eternity. Wow! So, if origins are lineage, like human lineage, what's this? Eternity? I don't think so, right? Is there an eternal human lineage? Doesn't make sense. Not if you look at origins, right? And if we're talking about the origin of this one, right? Like the source from which the one came in terms of the beginning of its life or his life, right? His creation, his being born originally in the past. Why origins, right? How many different births, how many different creations were there of this one in the past? So this doesn't make any sense to me. If you take it as origins, lineage, how could it be eternity? If you take it as origins like creation or born, well, how many of those were there? Even if you have the eternal generation view of Trinitarianism, which is nonsense, of course, it's not taught in the Bible, contradicted by the Bible, it still doesn't make sense. Because it's just one time he's generated, but it's ongoing in an eternal sense. It's nonsense, right? But, I guess maybe they try to relate it to that, like this ongoing generation process, right? And it's a plural. It's not taught in the Bible. And that's not what this means, as we'll get to in a moment. But we're looking at the English translations, right? We're comparing NWT, which we'll read next, with these other Bibles, right? These are the scholars. These are all the smart people that those who condemn the New World Translation tell us we should go to. And so far, they're all talking about some origins of old or ancient times or even eternity, right? New American Standard. His goings forth are from long ago, from the days of eternity. Now, this part, again, it is a plural word used in the Hebrew text and in the Greek. But it doesn't mean it's always to be a plural. Either way, let's take a look. because New American Standard says goings forth again from the days of eternity. So what's this goings forth? It's a plural, right? So it's not just one generation, and the lineage of humanity doesn't go back eternally. So to me, it doesn't, it's another one that doesn't make sense. King James, whose goings forth have been from of old, from everlasting. It's kind of similar to from eternity or days of eternity. Goings forth. Okay, what are those? Goings forth. What are we talking about? Are we talking about activity before this one was a man? So, right, so then this one is living, right? There's existence and there's activity. Goings forth. His goings forth. Goings forth are from old, from everlasting, from eternity, right? So they want to make it like eternal, but what is it they're talking about? What are the goings forth? What are these origins, and why doesn't NIV say eternity? I think the reason NIV doesn't say eternity is because they associate this more with human lineage. And I think the reason why New American Standard, Berean Study, King James say goings forth and eternity or everlasting is because they see this as a pre-existence thing. Holman Christian Standard Bible, his origin, singular. That's interesting, right? So all the others were plural, goings forth, origins. Now we get to Holman Christian Standard Bible, and it says origin, but from antiquity, from eternity. Right, so if they understand it to mean like begotten in an eternal generation sense, like later Trinitarians, non-biblical stuff, that could be what they're meaning. Origin, or a generation, a birthing, a creation even, but they don't like that word. Yeah. Even though it's used in parallel sequence, Proverbs 8:22, we'll get to it. And I've talked about it. This is kind of more clear with the singular origin and eternity. His origin, right? That you understand when someone says, oh, that person's origin is from, 1922 or whatever, right? It's not, normally we don't use origin that way, right? We'd say their birth was back in 1922. His origin is from eternity. So it's at least to me a little clear, but this eternity is not correct here. Oh, let me go back to that. I'll show that in a moment. His existence has been from antiquity, even from eternity. Whoa! Right, so this, now, with existence, we're really getting more clear here. That they understand, the International Standard Version understands, his existence is from eternity. Right, like you could say in John 8:58, when he's talking about his existence being before Abraham, International Standard Version is understanding Micah 5:2 to say his existence is from eternity, not just before Abraham. So again, there's a little more clarity here in terms of what we're talking about, right? Versus origins, plural, goings forth, plural. Origin and existence at least are more clear, but they're not the plural, and the form of the word used in Hebrew and Greek is a plural, even though, as I'm going to show, plurals aren't always to be understood as real plurals, numerical plurals. They can be collective or used for a singular subject. All right, and then we have this eternity again. Is that what that means? Net Bible. One whose origins, there's the plural, are in the distant past. That's different from eternity, isn't it? So we're getting a lot of different translations from all these smart people. All right, we're getting the plural for origins, We're getting the singular, his existence, his origin. We're getting eternity. We're getting distant past, ancient days, eternity. Why are we getting so many different translations? Why haven't these people figured this out? Well, there are often, or I should say at times, texts that aren't so easy to figure out. But what we're reading here, in most of the cases, doesn't make a lot of sense. A couple do, right? I think this one is pretty clear. His existence is from eternity, right? I don't think it's correct, but it's clear. Let's look at, let's find English Revised Version, whose goings forth are from of old, from everlasting. Young's literal, his comings forth are from of old, from the days of antiquity. Okay. All right, so we've gotten a good sampling of all the smart people's translations of Micah 5:2. All the really degreed people. No one questions their knowledge and stuff, right? And so we've seen a few different points of view. Let's take a look at the New World Translation. Let's go ahead and bring it up. Micah chapter 5. Verse 2. Let's see what it says. And you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, the one too little to be among the thousands of Judah, from you there will come out to me the one who is to become ruler in Israel, whose origin, singular, is from early times, from the days of time indefinite. All right. So we're clearly getting kind of like one of the other translations that we saw, origin in the singular. It was the we had at least one other one that gave us origin in the singular, the Holman Christian Standard Bible, and then we had the International Standard Version, his existence, his origin, very similar. His origin is from early times. And then we get the parallel phrase. They're really kind of referring to the same thing, right? Early times. His origin is from this, from that, right? So when we read in these other Bibles, his existence has been from antiquity, even from eternity. We're getting the same thing said basically twice, or at least in association with the other, right? From antiquity, from eternity. Or back to the NIV, from of old, from ancient times, right? Those are more parallel. Those are more parallel than these down here, which bring in eternity, right? From long ago is not quite the same as from eternity. From of old is not the same as from everlasting. From antiquity is not the same as from eternity. But from of old is basically the same as from ancient times, right? So that's why I give the NIV credit here. It's consistent in its description of origins, or as we've read in other texts like the NWT as well, origin. So we're going to come back. We're going to get to this in a moment. But NWT, from early times, from the days of time indefinite, right? You can't put a calendar on it. No one can point back to the exact time. They're from early times, though, right? What's early times? We don't really know, do we? It's just old. Time indefinite. But it's not eternal. That's not the same thing as saying it's eternal. So let's talk about this use of the plural and why it's translated in NWT and in a few other translations in the singular. I'm going to bring up a note. I wrote this paper over 10 years ago. Micah 5, 1, 2. There's in the Hebrew text, the word, the verse ordering is a little bit different in some translations. So in some it's 1 in the Hebrew text, in some it's 2 in the English text. So 1, 2, that's why I put it like that. But I'm talking about verse 2 the way we've been reading it. When it says Micah 5, 1, I'm talking about what you commonly know as verse 2. But you might read it as verse 1 in some of the original language texts. Reliable prophecy and real personal preexistence. November 24th, 2010 on my blog, Watching the Ministry. I'll put a link below if I haven't already. So I talk about a few things. I give my translation of the Hebrew and the Greek here. And this should be an image of the Greek Minor Prophet Scroll, but it's just not showing right now. We're going to read part of this because in this article I go through all the uses of the word that's translated in the plural and in the singular in Micah 5:2, Motza or Matzaot in the plural. And the plural form is used. So I have a note here at the very end. It's note 7 that I've captioned and that I'll bring up separately so we don't have to keep going back and forth. Well, let's read this together so that you understand. Well, that's actually a note I want to read after this one. Let me bring up this text here. This is another note. This is from note 33 on the plural. Let me break that a little bit more readable for everybody. And this is note 33 in that article. I think I can make that a little bigger so it's still all on the same page. I'll just read it out, and you can, of course, read this note in that article I reference. It's note 33. And I quote the grammar of Gesenius, standard Hebrew grammar. And there I note, a little bit bigger. There we go. The plural is by no means used in Hebrew solely to express a number of individuals or separate subjects, but may also denote them collectively. Right? We get Trinitarians who often bring up the plural form of God, Elohim, and which would, if you take it as a real plural, would have to mean gods, right? As it is at times used, gods, just like in Psalm 8:5. But they don't mean gods for the Trinity, right? They only believe in one God. So they're not even consistent with their explanation. I talked about it in my JWD editions. But it's just another ridiculous argument because they don't even believe what they're saying, that it's an actual plural. But there's another type of plural used in Hebrew, and that is to denote something collectively. This use of the plural expresses either a combination of various external constituent parts, plural of local extension, or be a more or less intensive focusing of the characteristics inherent in the idea in the stem. And I put two examples here that I noted in my own reading. In Proverbs 11:30, it says a tree of life. Tree is in the singular, but the word for life in the Hebrew text is in the plural, because it's doing exactly what Gesenius is talking about here. It's talking about a more intensive focusing of the characteristics inherent in the idea of the stem. And then in 1 Kings 12:27, it uses the plural for Lord for the singular subject, Rehoboam. So then there's many other examples. I just put two here. I could have put a lot more, but that's not the focus of this evening's discussion. But we are talking about plurals in Micah 5:2, Matzaot. And whether or not it's a real plural, origins, goings forth, or should be looked at in an intensive focus on the characteristic inherent in the stem, origin, or existence. Now I want to share this note. This is note 7. You can copy this from that article and take it with you if you want information that shows it's proper to translate Matzaot, the plural, not only in the singular, based on what we just read from Gesenius's Hebrew grammar and the examples I gave, but also from the lexical sources, the standard lexical sources that directly refer to Micah 5:2 and the use of Matzaot. Let's look at it. I would encourage you to just copy my note 7 and bring it with you wherever you talk to people so that you can show them that the NWT's use of the singular and other Bibles' use is appropriate. Yeah, it's a plural. It could be a plural. But again, as we're going to talk about in a moment, it doesn't make a lot of sense unless you're going to try to connect it with his human lineage. But even then, you run into problems because of the descriptions that are given from how far back that goes. Some even saying eternity, right? Note 7 from the paper that I referenced right here, my article from November 24th, 2010 that we'll get back to in a moment. This is note 7 from that paper. Francis Brown, SR driver, Charles A. Briggs, the new Brown driver, Briggs, Gesenius Hebrew and English Lexicon, published by Hendrickson, 1979, page 425. On page 426, the plural form of Matzah is used in Micah 5:1-2 and is cited and translated collectively as his origin. Gesenius's Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon to the Old Testament, Grand Rapids Baker, 1991, page 455, gives a going out, which is a singular, the place from which one goes out, that which goes out, and other meanings for matzah, that's the singular, with origin, singular, and springing for Micah 5:1, where the plural is used. William L. Holliday, A Concise Hebrew and Aramaic Lexicon of the Old Testament, Grand Rapids, Erdmans, 1988. Page 187 gives exit, what comes out, going out, import for matzah, and origin, singular, just like NWT, for the feminine plural form used in Micah 5:1-2. H.D. Proust, The Theological Dictionary of the Old Testament, Volume 6, Grand Rapids, Erdmans, 1990, page 227. In the sense of origin, exit, equal beginning. Micah 5:1-2. The Hebrew and Aramaic Lexicon of the Old Testament, Volume 2, Leyden, Brill, 1995, page 559, gives place of departure, exit, way out, pronouncement, and coming forth, appearance for matzah, the singular, and related forms, and origin for the plural of matzah, used in Micah 5:1-2. So again, we're getting all of these lexical sources agreeing with NWT, not with all the other translations by all those smart people that use origins in their translation. And so at times I will use the form in the text that's more similar to the form in the text Matzaot than Matzah. But we're talking about the plural when we're not using matzah. So if you note a difference there, that's the reason for that. And you'll see that more as we go back to my other article. But they're both referring to the plural form of matzah. And then we have David J. Klein's The Dictionary of Classical Hebrew, Volume 5, Sheffield Academic Press, 2001. Pages 183, 184 gives going out, place going out, exit, way out, source, spring, mine, or source for silver of Job 28:1. Growing place, act of going out, departure, and other meanings for the singular Motza, as well as origin for the plural of Motza used in Micah 5:1-2, and a translation given in that lexicon, his origin is from of old, from ancient days. Very similar to NWT, and in fact exactly like it in terms of origin. All of these lexical sources, these are all standard Hebrew lexicons and dictionaries, use origin. So the NWT, though it's in the minority of translations of Micah 5:2, has all of this lexical source behind it. How about that? And all those that use origins, and some with eternity, they made the least sense to me. They don't have as much lexical support behind them. Again, they're not incorrect technically, although when you consider how plurals are used, right? So you would have to understand, wouldn't you? You would have to have a sense for the meaning of the text to be able to determine when to use a real plural or a collective term, a term that's in the singular and that focuses on a characteristic of the term. It seems to me like NWT didn't just look at all these other translations, but they understood what all these lexical sources are pointing out and what Gesenius' Hebrew grammar describes. All right, so now let's go to my article and let's read part of it. Let's read part of it so we can get a better sense of what we're talking about in Micah 5:2. We've already shown that it's a plural, that most English Bibles by all these smart translators and scholars use a plural. Some don't, a couple didn't. They also attach it with terms that kind of make it confusing, like eternity, whereas NWT made it more in the indefinite past, an early time, an undefined period of the past, long time ago. I looked at every single use of Motza to try to find out the sense of the term in both the singular and the plural. Let's take a look at what I found out. Let me see if I can get this to show up a little better. I want it all to be on the page. See, that'll take it away. So again, you can read this whole article. Make it as big as you want. Let's just read a little bit of this together, okay? Bear with me, and we're going to get to some really amazing connections in just a moment. But let's go through this information. In this case, it appears the Greek Septuagint reading ha exodoi. That's the translation of the plural Motza in Hebrews and Micah 5:2. Septuagint, in translating what most English Bibles use as in terms of origins or goings forth, uses ha exodoi, right? Like the Exodus, the going out of the Hebrews from Egypt. And they use the plural, the Greek plural, ha exodoi, the goings out. In this case, it appears the Greek Septuagint reading corresponds in meaning to the feminine plural form of the noun Motza, used in the Hebrew text, Motza ot ayo, of Micah 5:1-2. Though the Hebrew plural may be used with the singular idea of origin or source, or even star, for which see below, rather than representing numerical plural. But both the Hebrew and Greek plural forms of the words in Micah 5:1-2 can also convey the meanings origins activities, or sayings, utterances, as I'm going to show. Motza is related to the verb yatsa, and it regularly means place or act of going out. Issue, export, source, spring. And there's that note 7, where I give all those lexical sources that we just read. Hilliers claims the nominal plural of motza, motza'a, related to yatsa in Micah 5:1-2, is too rare a word to permit a more precise rendering than rising on the basis of usage, claiming that it is in effect the only occurrence. Yet I'm going to show that the usage of motza in related terms is not difficult to isolate. As noted earlier in this article, I'm going to show through a review of motza in related terms the verbal idea of going out from is often abstracted into a noun meaning origin or source and even star. It is also used for concrete references such as exit, a mine, and even for a toilet. Motza in the singular and in the plural will be seen to have been regularly used in the Old Testament for the activity of an already existing person. Consider Genesis 38:25. The singular participle form of motza is used for Tamar as she was being brought out to be killed. Numbers 14:37. The plural participle motzie is used of the bad report that was brought out in Moses, to Moses, I should say, and Aaron and all the assembly. So something being brought out to them. Numbers 23:22, the verb motzayam is used in reference to the Israelites whom Jah brought forth from Egypt. Numbers 28:4, the singular participle motzio is used by Balaam again in reference to the Israelites whom Jah brought forth from Egypt. Numbers 30:13, here motza is used in the sense of an utterance of those words which go forth from a person's mouth as speech. Numbers 33:2, the plural form is used twice for the departure or goings forth of the Israelites from Egypt, which goings forth are then described in the balance of Numbers chapter 33. Deuteronomy 8:3, motza is used to describe the act of going out of the words from Jah's mouth. Deuteronomy 23:23 or 24, depending on which text you use. Motza is used again in reference to words which come forth or out from the mouth of an Israelite who makes a vow to Jah. 2 Samuel 3:25, a form of motza is used by Joab when speaking of Abner spying on David's going out or leaving or on the start of David's affairs. 2 Samuel 5:2, it's used of David's bringing out of the Israelites, which he did for war and for assembly, similar to Joshua. 2 Samuel 22:49, it's used to describe David as brought out from his enemies by God. 1 Kings 10:28, motza is used of the export of Solomon's horses from Egypt. Right? Do you see kind of a pattern here? It's not always used of an actual origin. It can mean that. And it kind of means that, right? Like words that come out of someone's mouth, when they go out from someone's mouth, they're kind of originating there. But they start in the mind, you could say. Still, you have many other instances, like we just read, of David bringing out the Israelites for war or exporting Solomon's horses from Egypt. 2 Kings 2:21, motza is used for the source or flow of the city's bad water. 2 Kings 10:27, the plural form motzaot is used for places of going out, right? Very similar to Micah 5:2 potentially, referring collectively to the toilet into which the house of Baal was made. Places of going out. 1 Chronicles 2:46, motza is used, I don't mean to parallel them in terms of a toilet. I mean in the sense of goings out, right? Just like we read in those translations. His goings forth. are from old or from eternity, like some of them said. 1 Chronicles 2:46, Motza is used of a proper name for one of the children of Ephah and Caleb, right? So that's a little bit different. 1 Chronicles 8:36, 37, and 42:43, Motza is again used 4 times for a proper name. Same as in 1 Chronicles 9:42, 43. 2 Chronicles 1:16, Motza is used again for the export of Solomon's horses from Egypt. In 9:28, used for the horses whom others were bringing out from Egypt to Solomon. 2 Chronicles 32:30, Motza is again used in reference to a source or flow of water, namely the waters of Gihon, which Hezekiah stopped up. Nehemiah 6:19, it's used in reference to the origin of the words of Nehemiah, which were then brought out from him to Tobiah. Job 28:1, Motza is used for the source of a mine of silver. So again, we do get source, origin in a more explicit sense, but we're also getting this sort of going out, right, of something that's already in existence, like Solomon's horses. Job 38:27, the use of Motza is here for the source or place of going forth of the earth's grass. Psalm 19:6-7, Motza is used for the sun which goes forth from the end of the heavens, like a mighty one to run a race. Right? And you could say the appearance is like its source, its goings forth is from the ends of the heavens, from the start of the sky. Psalm 65:8-9, the plural form Motzai is used for the comings or goings forth of the morning and evening. And there's this possible use of it for stars, like I also read in part of what I discussed earlier. I'm not going to get too much into that tonight, but that will come up when I talk about the Star of Bethlehem and the astrologers. There's more to that star than just a real star, like a burning sun star. That's not necessarily what it's talking about when it says his star. We'll get to it another time. It'll take us a little too far away. Psalm 68:6-7, it's used of those whom Job brings out from prison bonds. And then it's used of a similar word. The next psalm uses a similar word of God who goes out from his holy dwelling to lead his people. And there's a little bit deeper discussion that I get to here for this particular instance of Motza, but you can read that on your own because I don't want to burden the live stream with too much technical reading. Just know there's a little bit more going on with this instance here you might want to take a look at. Psalm 75:6-7, Motza is used for the place of going forth of the sun, or to the beginning coming forth of day, which is in the east. Psalm 89:35, Motza is used for the command of Jah, which goes out from him. Psalm 107:33-35, the plural form is used twice for sources or collectively as a source, just like we read from Gesenius's Hebrew grammar, and from all those lexical sources. A real plural doesn't always have to be a plural. And in fact, it often is not. It can be collectively as source or spring or pool of water. Psalm 135:7, Motza is used of the wind with which Jah brings out. Proverbs 10:18, the participle form of Motza is used for the one sending out slander. Again, there's sort of a source from which something comes idea. Isaiah 41:18, the plural form is used for sources, collectively as the source or spring of the dry land's water. Isaiah 54, we just have a few more to go. Hang on, bear with me. Right? Let's be complete. Let's talk about them all. Let's just get it done. Right? You want to know, what does Micah 5:1-2 mean? Well, we've talked about it lexically. We've seen the translations. Now we're looking at what the key term in the Hebrew text, Motza or Motza'a, Motza'ot in the plural, can mean. In all these other texts, it seems consistent. In most cases with something going out, coming out from something. Sometimes already in existence, like Solomon's horses. Other times not, like words from Jah's mouth or from other people's mouths. Isaiah 54:16, it's used of the one who brings forth a weapon through labor. Isaiah 58:11, here the singular form Motza is used for the source, for a source or spring of water. I want you to understand this. I want you to know how you can use my article. I want you to know how you can go about determining the meaning of a term on your own by looking up all of its occurrences and checking it out, making sure. Right? We don't have to rely on all these scholars. It'd be nice. We'd like to. We would hope that with all their learning, they could make things clear for us. But you know what? We're pretty smart too. We can figure things out. Let's keep going with this idea to see where it leads us to, or to where it leads us. Jeremiah 17:16, here Motza is used again for the command which goes forth from Jah. Jeremiah 38:22-23, here the plural participle is used of those who were brought out to the princes of Babylon. And in Jeremiah 38:23, it's similar, used to describe the soon-to-be captured wives and sons of Judah would be brought out to the Chaldeans. Ezekiel 12:4, Motza is used for the going forth of Ezekiel as one going into exile. 42:11, it's used at the exits of the dining rooms in the temple plan. 43:11, it's again used for the exits or places of going out of the temple. Ezekiel 44:5, it's used at the exits or places of going out of the temple. Daniel 9:25, Motza is used for the going forth of the word to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. Right, that hadn't happened before it went out. So there's definitely a sense of origin, place of beginning, as well as the goings forth of things that are already existing. Hosea 6:3, a form of Motza is used for Jah who goes forth as the dawn, similar to the rest of the verse, which speaks of Jah coming forth like the rain which waters the earth. So it's very clear from the uses of Motza and related words in the Bible that it can and often does mean activity by a person, right? Or the person's being brought out or going out. It's also used of exits of a building, of exporting of horses, as well as for sayings, words, vows, commands, reports, going out from people. And so I write here, my review of the use of Motza and related forms shows that it is also used as a plural form, but with the collective sense of an origin or source of things, like silver, Job 28:1, grass, Job 38:27, or flow of water, the source of the water, 2 Kings, Psalm, Isaiah, and even for a toilet, the original going out house, 2 Kings 10:27. Motza and related forms are also used of the apparent visual going forth or rising of the sun, or to the beginning, coming forth of the day, as well as a proper name. And so there's no instance of Motza in any of those texts which involves naming, like we read in the Aramaic Targum of Micah after Jesus came and the controversies with him began. It says the Messiah, that one was named from days of old. Motza does not mean that anywhere in the uses of the singular or plural in the Bible, and nor does it denote a genealogy or a descent of a subject from a family line. Right? None of those instances showed that. So when they say origins in the English translations that we read, like the NIV and others, what are they talking about? Yeah, it's a plural, but if they're scholars, right? They're supposed to be like the smartest biblical people. So they should be able to detect most of the time, especially based on the context, when we have a collective use of a plural, or one that focuses on an inherent characteristic of the term, so that it makes sense. NWT did that, consistent with all of those lexical sources that we read, and a couple other translations. None of the uses of Motza or the plural form mean descent from a family line. None of them. We just read them. So let's go where I talk a little bit further about this issue. Let's see where I pick up again. Right here. I talk about a few other things, so I don't want to get lost in the discussion, but I kind of discuss some of those issues related to the Targum that I brought up and what it means in terms of post-Christian Judaism. But the biblical use of Motza and the plural form do not support the idea of naming, right? None of the instances we just read support that view. And you could see why the Targum would then try to establish that meaning after Jesus was born in Bethlehem. The Christians are running around talking about him having this origin or these goings forth before he was born in Bethlehem. And so I talk a little bit more about that, and then I say there are simply no good reasons here to ignore or to fail to fully consider the use of the Greek plural form exodoi as a translation for or true indicator of the sense of motzaot in Micah 5:1-2. Indeed, exodus and related verbal and nominal forms are used 81 times in the Septuagint. It's used frequently for the activities, exits, or going out of Jah or of a person or of a tribe of people for various reasons, including for war. I cite the texts. It is used for the departure of the Israelites, for the exporting of horses and other items. Right? This is going back to the uses that I just read of the plural form, where exodoi is also used, or related verbal and nominal forms. Used of the exporting of horses and other items from Egypt. I'm talking about the Septuagint now, but this is consistent with the same text in the Hebrew text where Motza was used, or the plural form. Or release from and the end of religious servitude under or in relation to festivals, Sabbaths, assemblies. It's used of what issues forth from the heart. It's used of ways out or streets. I'm talking about the Greek term exodoi or exodus being a consistent translation for motza or motza'a, motzaot. Exodus or exodoi is used once for the going forth of the command to rebuild Jerusalem. In the Greek text now, we read about it in the Hebrew text. It's used for the visual appearing or going forth of the sun, for the outgoings of the morning, in reference to the east. It's used of the source of the earth's grass, just like we read in the Hebrew text. So you see the consistency in all these texts in the Septuagint with exodus or exodoi or related verbal forms, and motza, motza'a, motzaot. They're used together frequently as a corresponding term, just like in Micah 5. So now I note here, though, a special use, right? So I do believe the NWT is justified in using the singular, especially in the Hebrew text. But the Greek text uses the plural. Why would it do that? If the Greek translators understood the Hebrew text to be a collective singular, why use the plural? I think there's a very good reason. I think while the singular origin does fit what we elsewhere know about this ruler from Bethlehem, and it does fit the understanding and sense of the collective plural in the Hebrew text, as we saw from the grammar and lexical sources we read, the Septuagint translators appear to me to have picked up on something very important. I talked